My name is Corey Morrison. I'm 31 years old, and I've learned something the hard way. Sometimes the smallest cracks in a relationship reveal the deepest fractures. That morning, the crack was oat milk. I was rinsing breakfast dishes when John's voice pierced through the kitchen, sharp enough to slice the air. Seriously, Corey, you bought the wrong one again. I glanced over my shoulder. He was standing by the counter, carton in hand, shaking it as if it contained betrayal itself. That's the regular blend, he continued, rolling his eyes. I told you I only use the barista kind. This doesn't foam right. How am I supposed to make my latte? I dried my hands on a towel, biting back the first sarcastic response that rose in my throat. They were out of barista. I went to 2 stores. This one tastes the same. It's not about the taste, he snapped, slamming the carton down like it had insulted him. It's about you not listening. You never listen, Corey. My chest tightened, not because of the oat milk, not even because of his tone. No, it was the script, the one I knew by heart. Minor inconvenience, catastrophic conclusion, threat. Always the same ending. I turned back to the sink, letting the warm water ground me. John, it's oat milk. It'll be fine. His sigh was heavy, theatrical. This is exactly the problem. You don't care about my needs. You never have. I kept my voice steady. I spent an hour looking for your specific brand. A real girlfriend, he shot back, wouldn't have given up. There it was, the knife twist. I felt the sting, but forced myself to focus on the suds sliding down a plate. In the reflection of the window, I could see him, hands on hips, chest puffed up like he was auditioning for a drama. Then it came, the line I had been waiting for. You know what? I could leave you anytime. Remember that. It should have gutted me. 2 years ago, it would have sent me spiraling, begging him not to go apologizing for things that weren't my fault, promising to do better. I'd lived that scene over and over. But this time, something inside me shifted. I didn't cry. I didn't plead. I didn't even turn around. I just said quietly, "Noted." The silence that followed was almost comical. I could feel his confusion radiating across the room. "Noted," he repeated, voice dripping with disbelief. That's all you have to say. I stacked another plate in the drying rack, calm, as if we were discussing the weather. What else do you want me to say? I want you to care. His voice cracked with desperation. I want you to care that I might leave. I finally turned to face him. His dark hair was messy, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning me like he was searching for a hint of panic. But he found none. You threaten to leave every time we disagree, I said evenly. About coffee creamer, about movies, about which way the toilet paper hangs. It's not about caring, John. It's about control. His face twitched. Do you know how many women would kill to be with me? I almost laughed. The same ones you text when you're angry at me? Yeah, I know. That stopped him cold. He hadn't expected me to bring it up, but I wasn't guessing. He'd left his Instagram open on my laptop more than once. I'd seen the late-night heart emojis, the conveniently timed, hey you up messages. You went through my phone, he demanded, voice breaking into outrage. I didn't have to, I replied. You left it open. At 2 a.m, no less. Some friends you've got. They're just friends, he barked. At least they appreciate me. I met his gaze unflinching. Then maybe one of them will let you crash when you decide to leave. His mouth opened, then closed. For the first time in years, John looked uncertain, like a magician whose favorite trick had failed in front of a crowd. Without another word, he stomped toward the bedroom, the slam of the door rattling the frame. That was his standard finale. Usually I would crumble by now. I'd knock on the door, slide in, quietly apologize for the oat milk, the argument, the imaginary sins. Sometimes I'd order his favorite takeout to smooth things over. Always I'd be the one crawling back. But not this time. I turned off the sink, poured myself a cup of coffee with the wrong oat milk, and took a slow sip. It tasted fine. Better than fine, actually. And as I sat there, I realized something startling. His threats had only ever worked because I let them. He never left, not once. Why? Because leaving wasn't an option for him. His part-time influencer income barely covered his car payment. Rent bills, groceries, streaming services, all me. Every I could leave you anytime had been a lie, a bluff to keep me hooked. But what if just once I didn't bite? What if I called his bluff and made leaving easy for him? The thought sent a shiver of defiance down my spine, the kind that feels both terrifying and liberating. I pulled out my phone and scrolled to Marisol's number. She had been complaining for weeks about covering her apartment rent alone since her last roommate bailed. I typed a message, "Hey Marisol. Still looking for a roommate, might know someone soon." I didn't send it yet, just stared at the words, the unsent message glowing back at me like a secret. In the bedroom, I heard John pacing, probably waiting for me to knock. But the door stayed shut. For the first time in 2 years, I wasn't the one chasing. I leaned back in my chair, took another sip of coffee, and let the silence between us stretch. Inside, something settled, a quiet, dangerous kind of clarity. If he could leave any time, maybe it was time to find out if he actually would. The next morning, John emerged from the bedroom wearing the smug expression I knew too well. His favorite routine was unfolding. Wait for me to grovel, then let me earn forgiveness. He leaned against the counter, arms crossed. So, nothing to say about last night. I stirred sugar into my coffee, deliberately slow. Good morning to you, too. His brow furrowed. That's it, no apology. For what I asked without looking up. For dismissing my feelings. For not respecting me. I met his eyes then, holding steady. You said you could leave any time, John. I'm just respecting that. For a moment, he froze, thrown off script. He covered quickly with a scoff, muttering something under his breath as he grabbed his keys and stormed out. When the door shut, I let out a long, shaky breath. My hands trembled not from fear, but from the adrenaline of standing my ground. It was both terrifying and exhilarating. That night, instead of waiting for him to initiate another fight, I quietly took action. I scrolled through rental listings filtering by under $700 a month. The results were dismal. Peeling paint, rusty sinks, neighborhoods you didn't walk through alone. Still, I bookmarked a few. My phone buzzed. A reply from Marisol. Still desperate for a roommate. Why do you know someone? I typed back maybe. I'll let you know soon. My finger hovered, then I hit send. The tiny whoosh of the message felt like a war drum in the quiet apartment. The following day I struck. John wandered into the living room, scrolling through his phone. I slid my laptop toward him. Hey, look at this place. 1 bedroom, $650 a month. Move-in ready. His eyes narrowed at the screen. What's this? An option for when you leave. I sipped my coffee casually. Since you said you could anytime. His head jerked up. Are you kicking me out? I kept my voice calm. No, I'm facilitating. You made it clear you don't need me, John. I figured I'd help with logistics. The way his jaw clenched told me he hadn't expected me to call him out this directly. This place is a dump, he spat. You know I can't afford my own apartment. I raised an eyebrow, then maybe stop threatening to leave every week. The silence between us stretched. His bravado cracked for just a second, just long enough for me to see the panic flicker in his eyes. He tried to recover, muttering, "You're insane," before retreating back to the bedroom, but the seed was planted. Later that evening, he tried a different tactic. Babe, he called from the kitchen. I made dinner. I looked up from my laptop. He'd reheated leftover pizza I'd bought 2 days ago. Thanks, I said flatly, but I already ate at work. You never eat at work, he accused. I started meal prepping. I lied smoothly. Help save money. His eyes narrowed. Saving money for what? I shrugged. Life changes. The panic in his face was new. Usually I'd cave by now, apologize, reassure him, feed his ego. But I'd given him nothing but silence and calm indifference. It unsettled him more than any shouting match ever had. By day 3, John escalated. I woke to the smell of bacon and eggs, the first real breakfast he'd cooked in months. He greeted me with a forced smile. Thought you'd like a nice start to the day. I sat at the table studying him. Thank you. That's thoughtful. Relief flashed across his face. Maybe we could spend the day together like old times. I can't, I said, buttering my toast. I promised Marisol I'd help her move some furniture. His fork clattered against his plate. Since when do you hang out with Marisol? Since she might need a roommate. The color drained from his face. You're not moving in with her, are you? I tilted my head, feigning innocence. Not me. But I figured someone who says they could leave any time might. His lips parted like he wanted to argue, but no words came out. Instead, he shoved back his chair and stalked out of the room. I bit back a smile, hiding it behind my coffee cup. For the first time in years, he wasn't in control. And he knew it. By day 4, the tension in the apartment felt like a storm cloud refusing to break. John moved around me with forced nonchalance, his every glance loaded with expectation. He was waiting for me to break the silence, for me to chase him the way I always had. But I didn't. That evening, I came home to the scent of roasted chicken candles flickering on the dining table. John stood in the kitchen apron tied around his waist, flashing the smile he used to use when we first dated. Surprise, he said, lifting the lid off a serving dish. Your favorite. Garlic mashed potatoes. I hesitated in the doorway, almost laughing at the absurdity. You cooked. His grin widened. Of course. Thought it'd be nice. We could eat together, talk. Reconnect. I slipped off my coat, hanging it carefully on the chair. That's thoughtful, John. But I already ate. The smile froze on his face. You what? Work dinner, I lied smoothly. Didn't want to waste food. The flicker of panic in his eyes was subtle but unmistakable. For the first time I realized how dependent he was on my predictable forgiveness. Without it, he was flailing. By the weekend, he shifted tactics again. I woke to find him scrolling his phone with exaggerated interest, chuckling at messages that popped up on the screen. He left it on the coffee table, notifications buzzing like a neon sign. "Who's texting you?" I asked, my voice casual. He smirked. "Just friends. Jenna, actually. She wants to grab coffee later. She says I look stressed. Sweet of her, huh?" I sipped my tea unbothered. "Then go." The smirk faltered. "You don't mind?" "Why would I? You said you could leave any time. If coffee with Jenna helps, who am I to stop you?" He stared, waiting for jealousy to flare, for my voice to break. But nothing came. I simply turned back to my book. By evening, he returned from his little outing, slamming the door harder than necessary. "You didn't even text to check where I was." I looked up calmly. "You're an adult, John. You don't need my permission slips anymore." He stormed past me, muttering curses under his breath. Day 7, the allies arrived. I was folding laundry when my phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was his sister, Maya. "Corey, what are you doing to John?" she demanded the moment I answered. "He's freaking out. Says you're being cold and cruel." I folded a shirt neatly, keeping my tone level. "I'm just taking him at his word, Maya." "What do you mean?" "He says he could leave any time. I told him I'd support that choice." Her voice faltered. "You know he doesn't mean it. That's just how he vents." By threatening to walk away from the person who loves him, silence stretched across the line. Finally, she sighed. "Look, maybe you could just be a little more patient with him." I smiled bitterly. I've been patient for 2 years. My patience has run out. When I hung up, I expected guilt to creep in. Instead, I felt lighter. The truth was out, even if Maya didn't want to hear it. That night, John tried again. He leaned against the bedroom doorframe, arms folded. "You've changed," he accused. I met his gaze steadily. "No, I've stopped playing along." His voice cracked anger mixed with fear. "You don't even care if I leave, do you?" I took a deep breath. "I care, John, but I won't be held hostage by your threats anymore." He opened his mouth, but no clever comeback came. Instead, he slammed the door and fell into a brooding silence that carried through the walls. I lay awake that night, staring at the ceiling, my heart pounding. But it wasn't from fear. It was from clarity. For once, the power wasn't in his hands. It was in mine. The storm finally broke at dinner. It was John's mother's birthday, and she'd insisted on a small family gathering at her house. I almost declined. John had been sulking for days, oscillating between icy silence and forced sweetness, but something told me to go. The living room smelled of rosemary and roast beef. The long dining table was set with mismatched candles, soft music humming in the background. John slipped his hand around my waist as we walked in the perfect image of a doting boyfriend. To anyone else, we looked flawless. To me, it felt like a performance. We sat down between his parents and his sister Maya. Conversation flowed easily. At first, work updates, the new family dog, casual laughter. John joined in with practiced charm, laughing louder than usual, making sure to brush my hand every so often. Halfway through the meal, his mother leaned toward me. "Corey, you're so quiet tonight. Everything all right?" I smiled politely, just enjoying the food. John chuckled, forcing levity. "She's been weird lately, right, babe?" I turned to him slowly. "Have I?" He froze for half a second before recovering. "I mean, you've been distant. Trouble in paradise, huh?" His tone was teasing, but his eyes were daring me to contradict him. I set down my fork. "We're perfect. At least that's what you like to tell people." The table quieted. His sister tilted her head. "So, which is it, perfect or not?" John gave a nervous laugh. "Well, you know me. I always remind Corey I could leave any time. Keeps her on her toes." The words slipped out before he realized their weight. Silence slammed down like a heavy curtain. His father's fork clinked against his plate. "You? What?" John's face drained of color. "I mean, it's just a joke. You know, playful banter." Maya frowned. "That doesn't sound playful." His mother's eyes narrowed. "John, do you threaten to leave her?" "Not threaten," he said quickly, sweat beading at his temple. "I just remind her I have options." The words hung in the air, ugly and raw. I didn't move. Didn't speak, just let the silence do what I'd never been able to. His family's eyes turned on him, judgment heavy in their stares. Finally, his father pushed back his chair, disappointment etched deep in his features. "Son, that's not love. That's manipulation." John's jaw worked soundlessly like a fish out of water. I reached for my glass of water, my hand steady. "It's been like this for a long time," I said quietly. His mother looked at me, her eyes soft with something I hadn't expected, pity. "Corey, why didn't you say anything?" I forced a smile, because I kept hoping he'd stop. No one spoke for the rest of the meal. The air was thick, suffocating. John stabbed at his plate cheeks, burning red, while I savored each bite slowly, deliberately. For the first time, I wasn't carrying his secret alone. The car ride home was icy. How could you embarrass me like that? He hissed, hands gripping the steering wheel. I kept my gaze on the passing streetlights. By telling the truth, you made me look insane in front of my family. I turned to him, then my voice calm, almost gentle. You did that all by yourself. He slammed his hand against the steering wheel, the sound reverberating through the car. You've changed, Corey. You used to fight for me. I used to be scared of losing you, I replied softly. Now I'm more scared of keeping you. His mouth opened, but no words came. The rest of the drive was silent, the weight of my words pressing down heavier than any argument we'd ever had. That night, lying in bed, I stared at the ceiling as his breathing turned sharp and uneven beside me. I thought of his family's faces, shock, disappointment, pity. For once, they'd seen the truth. And for once, I hadn't defended him. I felt no guilt, only a strange, simmering calm. The mask was cracking, and John knew it, and soon it would shatter completely. The morning after the dinner, John barely looked at me. His jaw was tight, eyes darting, body buzzing with restless energy. By noon, I heard the unmistakable sound of drawers slamming. When I walked into the bedroom, he was tossing shirts into an open suitcase with the grace of a tantrum. He didn't even glance at me. Guess I'll start packing, he said loudly, projecting the words as if he were on stage. Clearly you don't want me here. I leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. Need some boxes I can call the storage place down the street. He froze, one sock clenched in his hand. His head turned slowly, disbelief etched across his face. You're offering me boxes. Of course, I said evenly. You've said 100 times you could leave any time. I figure I should be supportive. His mouth opened, then closed again. The performance was unraveling. For the rest of the afternoon, he stomped around the apartment, pulling random items from closets, sighing loudly, pausing dramatically at the doorway as though waiting for me to stop him. I didn't. Instead, I folded laundry in the living room, humming quietly. Finally, he threw a jacket into a bag and stormed out, slamming the door. An hour later, he came back empty-handed, muttering something about forgetting his charger. I didn't look up from my book. His suitcase sat untouched by the door. That evening, he tried to pivot. He sank onto the couch beside me, his voice softened, almost pleading. Corey, do you really want me to go? I closed my book slowly. John, you've been telling me for years that you could leave any time. I'm just taking you seriously. His voice cracked. But you're supposed to fight for me. That's how this works. I tilted my head. No, John. That's how you made it work. For you. He recoiled like the words had slapped him. The next day, the charade continued. He dragged his suitcase to the door again, making a show of struggling with its weight. Guess this is it, he said, his voice thick with drama. 3 years together, and this is how it ends. I glanced up from my laptop. Do you need the number of a mover? My friend used a great one last month. His face twisted. How can you be so cold? I met his gaze steadily. Because I've finally accepted what you keep saying. You could leave any time, so either do it or stop saying it. The words landed like a blade between us. His shoulders slumped. The suitcase stayed by the door untouched, gathering dust. That night, as I lay in bed, I realized something remarkable. The fear was gone. I used to dread the sound of him packing, the threat of abandonment hanging over me like a noose. But now it felt empty, performative, hollow. I whispered into the dark more to myself than to him. I'm not scared anymore. The ceiling fan hummed above, steady and calm. Beside me, John shifted restlessly, his breathing uneven, waiting for me to fold. But I didn't. And the silence between us was louder than any threat he'd ever made. By the second week, the apartment felt like a chessboard where John had run out of moves. His suitcase still sat by the door like a prop he'd forgotten to put away, and every day he glanced at it, hoping I'd beg him to stay. I never did. He tried filling the void with noise. His phone buzzed constantly. Messages lighting up the screen. Women I'd never heard of before suddenly appeared in his life. Jessica says I should take a break. Get out of town, he announced one evening, scrolling dramatically through his texts. She says I deserve better. I didn't look up from my laptop. Then maybe you should listen to her. His jaw dropped. That's all you have to say. Pretty much. He shoved his phone into his pocket, muttering curses. For the first time, I saw it the raw panic he couldn't quite mask. Without my fear, without my begging, his script was useless. A few nights later, he tried to bargain. We sat on opposite ends of the couch, the glow of the TV flickering between us. He cleared his throat, his voice softer than I'd heard in months. What if... He paused, chewing on the words. What if I stopped saying it? I turned toward him slowly. Stop saying what? That I could leave any time. What if I just didn't? I studied him, the desperation seeping through his carefully rehearsed calm. You mean stop using my love as leverage? His face twitched. It's not leverage. I need to know you care. By threatening to walk away every week, he shifted uncomfortably, the silence pressing on him. I didn't mean it like that. Which time, I asked. The 100th, the 200th. He flinched. For once, he had no answer. Later that week, I overheard him on the phone in the bedroom. His voice was low tense. Man, everything's too expensive. Studios are like only $500. How the hell am I supposed to afford that? I leaned against the wall, listening. His influencer gigs barely covered his car payment, and I'd been the one carrying rent, utilities, groceries. Reality was catching up to him. When he hung up, I walked in, leaning casually on the doorframe. Tough market, huh? He spun, startled. You were listening. I shrugged. You said you could leave any time. Guess it's harder than it sounds. His face burned red. You're enjoying this, aren't you? No, I said quietly. I'm done being afraid of it. The words stunned him more than any scream could have. That night, he crawled into bed beside me, his arm hovering hesitantly over my waist. You used to be terrified of losing me, he whispered into the dark. I admitted. And now I'm terrified of staying with someone who treats leaving like a weapon. He pulled his arm back, rolling away. For the rest of the night, I listened to him toss and turn, the rhythm of his restlessness a sharp contrast to my steady breathing. Days passed, and his tactics grew sloppier. He invited an old flame over for coffee, making sure I saw the texts. She came, they laughed. They reminisced loudly in the living room. When she left, he looked at me, waiting for the explosion. I just smiled faintly. Hope you had fun. His expression cracked. That's it. That's all you're going to say. You're an adult, John. You make your choices. For the first time, I saw the truth he had been running from. His threats, his games, his orbiters. None of it mattered if I wasn't afraid to lose him. And I wasn't. Not anymore. The night ended with me standing at the window, the city lights glowing faintly in the distance. Behind me, John sat hunched on the couch, phone clutched in his hands, silence pressing down heavy. I could almost hear the gears turning in his head, the frantic realization that his control was slipping through his fingers. And for the first time in years, I felt free. By the third week, John's desperation had turned into a constant hum in the background. He was quieter, but the silence wasn't peace, it was calculation. He watched me like a gambler running out of chips, waiting for the right moment to throw his last card on the table. That moment came at his cousin's engagement dinner. The restaurant was warm, filled with clinking glasses and the chatter of extended family. I wore a simple navy dress, my hair pinned back. John, as usual, played the role of doting partner, keeping a hand at the small of my back, whispering compliments that sounded rehearsed. At the table, his aunt leaned over with a smile. So, Corey, are you and John thinking about marriage anytime soon? I opened my mouth, but John cut in with a laugh that was just a little too loud. Oh, marriage isn't really our thing. I remind Corey all the time I could leave any time. The words slipped out like second nature, but this time they didn't fall into a vacuum. They landed in silence. Forks froze midair. His cousin blinked. His aunt's smile faltered. What do you mean by that? His uncle asked. John stammered. It's just a joke. Doesn't sound like one, his mother said softly, her brow furrowed. I didn't rescue him. Not this time. I took a sip of water and let the silence stretch. Finally, his cousin shook his head. Man, that's messed up. Why would you say that to someone you love? John's face turned crimson. He reached for my hand, but I pulled it back gently, folding it into my lap. For the rest of the meal, he was restless, fumbling through conversations, his laughter hollow. His mask was slipping, and everyone could see it. The car ride home was thick with tension. You humiliated me, he spat, gripping the steering wheel hard. I looked out the window at the blur of city lights. You humiliated yourself. I just didn't cover for you this time. His knuckles whitened. You used to defend me. I used to believe you'd change, I said quietly. Now I believe you won't. The words landed like stones. He didn't speak the rest of the way. When we got home, I found him in the bedroom, actually packing this time. Not the dramatic stomping, not the sighing. Real packing, folded shirts, neatly stacked jeans, toiletries, and a zip bag. I leaned against the doorframe, my voice calm. So you're really doing it? He paused, his back stiff. I saw your apartment listings, he said finally, his tone low. The ones you bookmarked. Studios. 1 bedrooms. All for 1 person. I nodded. Yes. His head turned slowly, his eyes searching mine. You weren't looking for me. You were looking for you. Why would I plan a future, I asked softly, with someone who always has 1 foot out the door? He swallowed hard, his voice cracking. I didn't mean it, Corey. Not really. All those times. I just wanted to know you cared. I stepped into the room, my voice steady. If you have to threaten to leave to feel loved, then you never trusted my love in the first place. His eyes shone with something between anger and grief. You're done. You're actually done. I met his gaze without flinching. I've been done since the oat milk fight. It just took you this long to notice. He dropped his eyes, zipping the suitcase shut. He left that night. For days, I didn't hear from him. Then the text began. I made a mistake. Tony's a creep. He just wanted to use me. I didn't mean any of it, Corey. Please let me come home. I swear I'll never say it again. I see what I had now. I didn't respond. A week later, I saw him in the lobby of our building. He was touring the very same studio I'd bookmarked months ago, the cheap one on the first floor. His shoulders were hunched, his hair unkempt. When he saw me, his face crumpled with something that almost looked like shame. Corey, he said softly. Hi, I'm just looking at places. I smiled politely. Cool. Good luck. He took a step closer, desperation in his eyes. Maybe we could get coffee, talk. I'm good, I said simply. Then I nodded at the studio door. That unit's actually nice. Affordable, too. He swallowed hard. Yeah, affordable. The building manager walked by nodding at me. Ms. Morrison, your friend Marisol says thanks again for recommending the place upstairs. She and her new roommate love it. Of course, I replied warmly. John blinked. You set Marisol up with a roommate. I smiled faintly. I told you. Some people are better at following through than others. For once, he had no comeback. That night, as I curled into bed alone, I felt a peace I hadn't known in years. Not triumphant, not gloating, just free. John had always said he could leave any time. Turns out so could I. And the sweetest victory was that I